Parshas Ekev, Perek Ches, Pasuk Aleph, chapter 8, verse 1, begins, Kol ha-mitzvah, asher anochi misavcha hayom, tishmeru asos, all the commandments, the entire commandment that I command you today, you shall observe to perform. L'man tichyun, so you may live and increase and come and possess the land. V'yirashtem es ha'aretz asher yishpa Hashem l'avosechem. So Moshe stresses that no Jew could pick and choose among the different commandments. The blessings, the brachas commanded by God, were contingent on the Jewish people's acceptance of the entire Torah, Kol ha-mitzvah. It's one single command. And that's what the simple reading of the pasuk is. All the brachas, we're going to talk about the food, and eventually v'yachalta v'savato v'yirachta. We'll have another class on the mitzvah Birkas Hamazon. But the Torah tells us Kol ha-mitzvah. So that's the simple reading, that the blessings of the land of Israel are dependent on keeping the Torah. Like the Orach Chaim HaKodesh writes on the mitzvah of Shemitah, Eitzel Har Sinai, that in order to keep Eretz Yisrael, you have to keep the laws of Shemitah. So similarly here. However, Chazal, Rashi quotes an interesting Chazal, Medrash Agada. What is the pasuk? Kol ha-mitzvah. Kol is in plural, mitzvah in singular. And mischalas b'mitzvah gamar also. That the Chazal are teaching us a general principle that one who begins a mitzvah, one should be careful to finish it, because the one who finishes the mitzvah gets credited for the mitzvah. That's what Rashi tells us, that one who finishes the mitzvah not only gets credit for finishing it, but gets credit for the whole mitzvah. And where is this based on? So Chazal tell us, our rabbis tell us, it's based on the incident in Parashas Beshalach regarding Atzmos Yosef, regarding the bones of Yosef. That the pasuk tells us in Beshalach that Moshe Rabbeinu took the bones of Yosef out of Mitzrayim. But Yikach Moshe is Atzmos Yosef. And Chazal, our rabbis tell us that while everyone else was involved with collecting the booty, the gold and silver, Moshe Rabbeinu Chacham Leiv Yikach Mitzvos, the wise one, is involved in mitzvahs, and he was involved in the mitzvah of taking out the bones of Yosef from the Nile River, and then the goal was to bring it into the land of Israel. However, if we look in Parsha, in the book of Yoshua, of Joshua, when it talks about the bones of Yosef, it says, as Bnei Yisrael shahalu, it gives the Jewish people, Bnei Yisrael get credit for taking the bones of Yosef out of Mitzrayim. So we have an apparent contradiction. But in the pasuk in Beshalach, it gives Moshe credit. Vayikach Moshe es Atzmos Yosef. However, when it comes to book of Yoshua, it gives credit for the Jewish people for taking Yosef's bones out of Mitzrayim. So which one is it? So the Gemara tells us a principle, the Gemara in Sota and the Medrash as well, that one who begins a mitzvah and someone else completes the mitzvah, not only does the one who completes the mitzvah get credit for finishing, but they get credit for the whole mitzvah. And factually speaking, there was no dispute. Everyone agrees, physically speaking, if you had a video there, it'd show you Moshe Rabbeinu carrying the bones of Yosef out of Mitzrayim. That's not disputable. Everyone agrees to that fact. And everyone agrees that the Jewish people are the ones who actually brought Joseph's bones into Israel and actually buried them. So that's not a dispute. Everyone agrees to the physical facts. But the halacha is telling us, what the Gemara is telling us, a tremendous thing, that one who finishes a mitzvah not only gets credit for finishing the mitzvah, but gets credit for everything. And that's what it's telling here. Kol ha-mitzvah, the Medrash Haggadah teaches me the same yisod, that the one who finishes the mitzvah gets credit. The one who completes the mitzvah gets credited for everything. And they learn out from the Kol HaMitzvah, this pasuk in this week's parsha. So is that so simple? Is that true? That the one who completes a mitzvah not only gets credit for finishing it, but gets credit for doing the whole thing? Is that so simple? Because we seem to have a medrash telling us the opposite direction. Because we say in davening every morning, Mizmar Shir Chanukas Habayis with David. We talk about the shir, about the song about the building of the Beis HaMikdash, and the song attributes David, King David, to the building of the Beis HaMikdash. And we all know, based on Psukim and Divrei Hayamim, and based on Chazal, that King David HaMelech wasn't zocheh to build the Beis HaMikdash. Many different reasons given, because he was involved in many wars, and therefore he had the blood of the wars on his hands, and therefore the Beis HaMikdash is a place of peace, and therefore David HaMelech couldn't have built the Beis HaMikdash. And even though it wasn't necessarily his fault, but just like we have a halacha of a Kohen Shaharag, a Kohen, a priest that's involved in a killing, so he can't do the Birkas Kohanim, he can't do the bracha of blessing the people, because Ein Kategor Nasa Sanegor, that the prosecutor can't be the defendant at the same time. It's a conflict of interest. The hands that were used to kill can't be the hands that were used for giving a blessing of peace. Again, so there's a whole discussion in the Rishonim, in the Poskim, exactly all the details on whether the person could, a discussion, Machaber Ramah, Svardim Ashkenaz, and person, whether you do tshuva, whether a person can do it or not, that's a separate discussion, but we have the same principle. So some say David couldn't build the Beis HaMikdash because he had blood on his hands. Others say David couldn't build the Beis HaMikdash because if he did, it would be permanent, and God knew that he wanted, the Jews were going to sin later, and he's going to have to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. In fact, we just observed Tisha B'Av, and that's the famous medrash Mizmal Yasaf, that when it talks about the Goyim destroying the temple, it uses the language of Mizmor, a song. So the medrash says Kina Yasaf. What do you mean a song? It should be a lamentation, but as Rav Soloveitchik elaborates, based on the medrash and Tosas and Kedushin, Daf Lamed Aleph quotes it, that it really was Iksas Nechama, that really it was a Mizmor, that God destroyed the temple, the stones, the Eitzim Va'avanim, the wood and the stones, instead of destroying Klal Yisrael. And therefore, if David would have built it, unfortunately, he wouldn't be able to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, and we wouldn't like the other option. So really, it was the greatness of David that he couldn't build the Beis HaMikdash. However way you want to work it, he didn't build the Beis HaMikdash. It was Shlomo HaMelech who built the Beis HaMikdash. And yet we find Mizmar Shir Chanukas Habayis LeDavid. It doesn't say LeShlomo. The building of the Beis HaMikdash is attributed to David and not Shlomo. David only began it and Shlomo finished it. So we see from here the one who begins the mitzvah gets credit for it. So we have an apparent contradiction. When it comes to the Atzmos Yosef, to the bones of Yosef, the Jewish people get credit for it. So we see the one who completes the mitzvah gets credit for everything. However, when it comes to the building of the Beis HaMikdash, we see David gets credit and not Shlomo. So we see the one who begins to build the Beis HaMikdash gets credit, not the one who finishes it. So how do we reconcile the two? So there are two ways of reconciling this apparent contradiction. One is by attacking the difference between Moshe versus David. That's how we'll deal with first. And then perhaps another way is to deal with the difference between the mitzvah of Binyan Beis HaMikdash, of building the Beis HaMikdash, and the mitzvah of Atzmos Yosef, of taking the bones of Yosef. So they point out, the commentators, as follows, that I think Rav Moshe has a tshuva about it as well. They discuss it, Piskei Tshuva, in terms of Shidduchim. That let's say there is a halacha that if someone makes a shidduch, sets up a match for a marriage, a man and a woman, so you're supposed to pay the shadchan, they call it shadchan's geld, to give them money to pay them for the tremendous mitzvah and service they did. And in fact, as the Rabbi points out, shadchan stands for sheker dover kesef nosein. If you don't have any kesef nosein, you're only left with shindal, which is shay, which means demons. Is not a good way of starting your marriage. But either way, so the question is, let's say someone set someone up, they went out a bunch of times, and they broke it off, and then months later, years later, someone else, a different person, set them up, and they rekindled the old flame, and they ended up getting married. So who gets the shadchanis geld? The one who did it first, or the one who finished it? So definitely the one who finishes, the last one gets credit. But the question is the first one get any credit? So the poskim discuss whether going out the second time, was that because of the first time, or the first time played no relevance? So there's discussion there by who gets the credit, the one who began it or the one who finished it. So the point being is, so the Mefarshim point out, the commentators point out, why didn't Moshe complete the mitzvah? It was Moshe's fault, so to speak. Moshe sinned on his level, whatever the sin was, but a certain sin he did, hitting the rock, or getting angry, whatever the mistake he made was, he was punished. He couldn't enter the land of Israel. So it was his own fault that he couldn't go to the land of Israel. If he didn't sin, he would be able to enter the land of Israel. So therefore, if you begin something, and then you don't finish it because of your own negligence, your own doing, so therefore you don't deserve to get reward. There would have been, many people would have taken the bones of Yosef out of Mitzrayim. It was your choice. You had the first merit. But it'll come to King David, David HaMelech, his whole life he was waiting to fulfill it, to build a Binyan Beis HaMikdash, of building the temple. And therefore, and he would have done anything, and therefore it wouldn't have happened at this time without him. Maybe many years later, they would have built the Beis HaMikdash. It's only because of him that Beis HaMikdash happened at this point, and that's the distinction. So when it comes to Moshe, it was his own fault why he wasn't able to do the mitzvah, and therefore it was your own negligence, you sinned, and therefore the one who finishes the mitzvah is going to get credit. However, by David, he did everything possible and then some. Without him, it wouldn't have happened, so we give credit to David HaMelech. So that's how some explain, to reconcile the apparent contradiction in the Medrash. While when it comes to the bones of Yosef, the Jewish people get credit because it's Moshe's own fault. However, when it comes to the Binyan HaMikdash, the building of the temple, David did everything possible, and therefore he deserves to be associated with the Mizmar She'er Chanukah Sabayis with David. That's one explanation. That's what the Mefarshim bring down. Perhaps we could suggest another explanation. And that's the issue of, we know we have two different categories of commandments. We know in Judaism we have commandments ben Adam lamakom, commandments between man and God, and commandments ben Adam lachaveiro, and commandments between people. In fact, that's what we just read last week, Parshas Ve'eschanan, about the 10 commandments. Really, it's a misnomer. There are 613 commandments, but the 10 principles, the first 5 are commandments between man and God. The second 5 are commandments between man and man. And that's why honoring your parents is the perfect link between, it's the number 5, it's a perfect transition between commandments between man and God and man, because parents are our creators also. And therefore we do mitzvahs between our Creator as well. So therefore when we honor our parents, we get a double commandment of honoring our creators, our parents, and parents are people too. When we serve our parents, we get also the mitzvah ben adam achavero, interpersonal commandments. So they point out that we know there are two types of commandments in Judaism: commandments between man and God, and commandments ben adam achavero, commandments between man and man. And there's a fundamental difference between them that we find, as Rav Shlomo Zalman points out, and the Rogachev or many other Achronim, that there's a fundamental difference. When it comes to mitzvahs be'ayam l'makom, so kavana, intention, plays a critical role. We know the Gemara talks about many times whether mitzvahs require intent or not. And of course, as I always explain, the question is always after the fact. In other words, if you did a mitzvah without the requisite intent, you have to repeat the mitzvah not. But not that, of course, beforehand you should do the mitzvah. So the whole discussion in the Gemara is only regarding mitzvahs ben adam lamakom, between mitzvahs between man and God. But by mitzvahs ben adam chavero, they don't need kavanah, you don't need intent, because the essence of the mitzvah, the essence of the bracha, is that's why some point out that koichem, why you don't make a bracha by mitzvahs ben adam l'chavero, because it's result oriented, it's not the act. So for instance, as our rabbis tell us, that if you have a $20 bill in your pocket and it falls out and a poor person picks it up, so then you fulfill your mitzvah tzedakah, even though you didn't even know you gave tzedakah, because it's result oriented. That when you give tzedakah, so when you do, so again, there's a lot to discuss on that, and we've discussed it in the past in other shiurim, and our series on Ben Adam L'Chavero, but fundamentally, there's a Ben Adam L'Makom, we're interested more in the machshava, in the act. When it comes to Ben Adam L'Chavero, commandments between man and man, interpersonal, so we're much more concerned with the result. In other words, we're not so concerned about your motives, what you were thinking. You can think all you want, but you know what, I really wanted to go to the hospital and visit. But if you don't actually visit the person, I really wanted to help this person, but you don't, you haven't really accomplished anything. That, as they point out, as the Klei Chemda points out, that's the distinction in a machshava tova, and a machshava, whether a machshava ra is mitzdaref l'maisa. So that's the whole Gemara Menachos. When the whole discussion there, when a person's going fishing on Shabbos, which is prohibited if you're successful, is a prohibition of fishing, trapping. The Gemara has a discussion there. If you're fishing, lo and behold, you save someone's life. You find a baby in the net. So you had in mind to fish. The Gemara says, it depends. Do we go by your act? If you go by your act, you did a tremendous mitzvah. If you go by your machshava, by your thought process, so you are desecrated the Shabbos. So the Klei Chemda points out that's only an issue between commandments between man and God, where the machshava, the thought process, plays a major role. But the commandments ben adam l'chavero, we're interested in the result. Bottom line, don't judge motives, because half the time you don't even know your own motives, and even if you do, you certainly don't know someone else's motives. And when you judge motives, you minimize the good and minimize the bad. As many people felt about communism in Russia. Oh, but they had good intentions, a spiritual utopia. With all the good intentions, Stalin and others were responsible for millions of deaths. And therefore you minimize how bad they were. Okay, they're good intentions, I don't care. I don't care what they did. And they were tremendous sacrifice, murdering of lives, of innocent people. And people downplay, oh, but you have U.S., one of the greatest democracies ever. Oh yeah, but they're capitalists, it's all greed. I don't really care what their motivations are, but look what America has produced. So best peaceful, loving countries around, and therefore the danger you get when you judge motives, when you try to minimize instead of judging the actions that are performed. So when it comes to God, God will judge motives, since He actually knows what our motives are. We don't know half the time, He does. But when it comes to Benam HaChavero, we want to focus on the result. Make sure you help that individual. Not so much, of course, having good intentions, doing that's something positive as well, but it's more of a focus on the result. And perhaps that's the distinction. We said there's an apparent contradiction. Because on one hand we said, we learned out in this week's Parsha, Atzmos Yosef, the bones of Yosef. So therefore, we said you get credited, that the one who finished the mitzvah gets credited for finishing it. That the Bnei Yisrael who finished it get credit for everything. And we see, the one who finishes the mitzvah gets credit for everything. Yet we see by Moshe Rabbeinu, that's what we see by Moshe Rabbeinu. Yet we see by David, even though David began to build the Beis HaMikdash and Shlomo finished it, yet we give credit to David and not to Shlomo. And perhaps the answer is because when we're dealing with the bones of Yosef, the mitzvah of Kvura, burial, we're dealing with the ultimate chesed shel emes, the ultimate act of loving kindness, burying someone. You're doing a chesed for someone. A chesed that someone now doesn't want to get paid back anytime soon on. So they point out that when it comes to Kvura, the ultimate mitzvah, Adam L'Chaveiro, it's all about results. Don't do me any favors. Take me out of the Nile and just dump me in the middle of the desert. You haven't done me any good. It's the one who actually finished the job by Adam L'Chaveiro, so they get all the credit. So Bnei Yisrael gets all the credit for burying Yosef, because doing half the job without finishing could be worse. However, when it comes to Binyan Beis HaMikdash, Karbanos, Mitzvahs B'Adam L'Makom, it's all about the Machshava. God knows, and God cares about your intentions. So when it comes to the Beis HaMikdash, the ultimate in mitzvahs between man and God, then the Machshava does play a role, and therefore the one who began the mitzvah, David, gets all the credit, because without him it never would have happened. And that's why it's Miz Mashiach Chanukah Sabayis David. And as well, just to conclude, we know we have the Tefillin Shel Yad and the Tefillin Shel Rosh. We have the hand tefillin and the head tefillin. And the hand tefillin represent action, that's B'Adam L'Chaveiro. The Rosh tefillin on your head, that represents your Machshava. And if you notice that you never left with only your head tefillin on. You have your hand tefillin you put on first, then you put on your head tefillin. You take off your head tefillin, then you take off your hand tefillin. You never just left with your Tefillin Shel Rosh, but you are always left with only the Tefillin Shel Yad. And the lesson is that even though obviously we have to be meticulous in both commandments between man and God, and man, to be an observant Jew, you have to keep both sides of the tablets. But when you want to begin, you want to ground yourself and take on different chumras, different stringencies. You should start off working on your interpersonal. As we just finished the 3 weeks Tisha B'Av, we know the churban and the destruction of the temple was because of sinas chinam. So we have to be extra meticulous now after Tisha B'Av and moving into the other days of getting ready for Elul and the Yom HaNoram to work on our B'Adam L'Chaveiro. And that's what the lesson every day of Tefillin is, that we never only have a Tefillin Shel Rosh on. Mitzvahs B'Adam L'Makom are very important, but if you want to take on extra stringencies, first you have to ground yourself and make sure you learn how to treat other people properly. And that's what the Tefillin Shel Rav represent, action which is representative of Mitzvahs B'Adam L'Chaveiro. And that's what we explained. There's a fundamental difference between commandments between man and God and man and man. B'Adam L'Makom focus on the Machshava, on the thought process, but B'Adam L'Chaveiro focus on the result. And that's why Moshe didn't do Yosef any favors to leave him in the Midbar. It's only the Jewish people who finished the burial, they get full credit. And similarly, David, when it comes to B'Adam L'Makom, it's all about the Machshava, it's all about the thought process, and that's why David, Mizmar Shir, Chanukah Sabayis David gets full credit for building the Beis HaMikdash.